Can't wait to get in person one day again soon. And Josh will be talking around about sales mastery, and hand it over to you, Josh. You are the expert around this, so thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me, and it's an honor
Good to see you again, Josh. Yeah, thanks
Good
for
to see
joining
you. Good to see you, Steve. So, guys, it was interesting. I did message Fabio yesterday and said, "Well, what direction do you want me to go?" Because I have like 30 million different directions I really do want to go, and it's very interesting. And I went down a rabbit hole yesterday with sales and startups. And 2020, I did some research, and 4.4 million new startups happened in 2020. And when it comes down to sales, and the sales surrounding any startup or anything in general, I have found that if you don't make it your own and you don't commit in the moment of a sale, then that's generally where people flounder. And it almost brings to memory a saying that is basically, people smell desperation like dogs smell fear, right? And the interesting thing about those 4.4 million that have startups and making it your own and becoming desperate and trying to make something work in the field of pressure, especially being a startup, 75% of those startups that happened were joint ventures, and they not joint ventures in the sense of we had partners or there were partners, but it was venture capitalists or people who were backing them. And out of those 75%, all of them had a massive say in what happened with the company. And that 75% actually failed out of the 4.4. So whatever you're doing, especially in a sale or in a startup, the sale you have to make your own. You have to be unique and you have to stand out. That's crucial. When it comes down to making the sale, right? I personally, and I train all my clients this way, you never show up to sell. You're not there to sell. You never will. I mean, you're going to struggle with, I won't say never, because never's a bad word sometimes. But when you do show up to sell, the struggle really becomes putting the person first and putting their needs first. So the way you stand out to be unique and be different. Like Steve's mentioned, the website, everybody on their website now has a click now to schedule a strategy session, book now for your call, book now for a battle plan. Everybody has that. So one way you can really stand out is that sales call. And that is the way you stand out in that sales call is you put their needs first. And you spend the time really understanding who your potential client possibly could be, who that person is. And you come at it from a different standpoint, and that's the most crucial thing that I find with my clients who are massively taking massive strides in hitting goals every single month, and they're hitting goals like never before. One gentleman I just brought on 4 months ago, he was averaging 4 sales a month. He's averaging over 20 now. Massive revenue in just 4 months. So, and that's in high ticket sales. That's not just a sale. That's, 5 to 6,500 depending on what they're doing. Again, it's never about the sell. You're showing up to help that person. I can scream that from the rooftops. I can yell about it. But again, that's the new trend, but that's the trend that really needs to be adopted. You're not there to sell. Once you can get out of the way of, you're not there to sell, understanding what the person needs becomes felt by the other person. And that's the unique or the different feeling in this sales process. So startups, I go back to the desperation thing. Everybody's desperate to make their first sale. Everybody wants to really get in and I've sold one. Yes, which is awesome. You definitely want to make a sale, but you want to make sure the person's the right fit. And you want to be careful too, if you bring on a sales trainer or sales coach. There's some out there that say they have a 90% close rate with a salesperson, right? Or their sales people are doing a 90% close rate. That's something you really want to be careful of as well, right? The reason being is, especially with startups, if you bring somebody on that is not a good fit, because if you sell everybody in, that's kind of a red flag. The red flag being not everybody's going to be a perfect fit for what you need, or maybe if it's an e-commerce side or startup, whatever the startup business, and I work with a lot of trainers and coaches, you're selling everybody in or everybody's purchasing your product or service that may not be the right fit for some. So it can be, create a negative stance in the market. And that's the one thing you definitely want to avoid. So if you avoid the negative stance and the negative feedback, you've just dodged a massive bullet that allows you to grow even further, right? Everybody that loves your product is going to be talking about it, sharing it. Now back to that positive experience or different feeling on a sales call. If that person isn't a fit, right, and you still allow that person to understand that person, but you allow them and give them that space to actually express what they're struggling with or why they're on the phone with you in the first place, what ends up happening is, and if they're not a fit, what ends up happening is you give them your time, you show them that respect, and they're going to tell everybody about that. And they might not be a fit right then, or the product you have may not work for them right then, but guess what does happen? When they are a right fit, or when the product you have will work for them, they will reach back out to you. But people remember a negative experience. There's a lot of trainers, coaches out there who have sales teams, salespeople, or them themselves. They actually create that negative error around their company that the negativity can be so overwhelming that nobody wants to move forward with you. Potential clients or people that thought they may have wanted to work with you, or people who saw your ad go, oh, I've heard about their sales process. So again, desperation, people smell that like dogs smell fear. So we want to stay away from being desperate, and we want to make sure, even if that person's not a fit, that we give them our time, whether it's a allotted shorter time or the full length of whatever time they're asking for. We give it to them and we move them forward in the direction they're wanting to go, even though we may not be a fit right then. Okay? So we're always wanting to show up to help. Another thing besides, the way to stand out and be unique is very interesting, because, you always want to try to relate to the person you're, the potential client, right? That potential client could be somebody that just desperately needs help, okay? But we don't want to be the one talking all the time. And what that means is, when I'm on a sales call and I'm speaking to a potential client to bring into mastery in sales, I commit to speaking less than 10% of the time. And the reason I do that is it shuts my brain off, shuts my thinking off as far as about me. There's been times when I'm like, oh man, I gotta share that story. And it's like, the story isn't applicable. The story doesn't, it would really apply, but it isn't applicable in the sense of, it's not gonna move them forward and help them really see how I can help. Okay, so I'm always about the help. I'm there to help. Okay, so it's never about me in the sense of, I want to share a great story or share an experience or talk about current events. I'm never there for that. I'm not their friend, never will be their friend, but I am their best friend. Because a best friend, when it does time, like Steve, you mentioned earlier, keeping or you and Fabio work so well together because of the accountability, right? You have that accountability partner. A best friend or someone that you're really close to is going to hold you accountable, is going to keep you to your highest standard or your highest and best. They're not going to allow you to falter. So when it comes down to not calling them out, there's no reason to call them out, but there is a point to actually move them forward. You can't ask the hard question if you're their friend. But if you're the best friend, when I'm on a sales call with a female, I use the illustration in my head. I don't say it, but I'm like, your best friend is going to tell you that those shoes don't go with that dress. But a friend's going to be like, you look great, don't worry about it. You know, that's the difference. So when you show up as their best friend. You hold them accountable, and you hold them to that standard. Because when they start to falter, you're not going to let them falter. You're going to basically hold them up and say, okay, you just said this, and this is what you want, this is where you want to be. And I have the solution. If you're not willing to move forward today, then how are you going to get there? At least put them on that track. And they may come back with, I just don't have the time right now. I don't have the money. I don't have the, whatever it may be. There's a million things. I have to check with my spouse. This is how you handle objections. Okay, well, if you have to check with your spouse, or if you don't have time, how do you see getting there? I mean, this is the solution. That's where you want to be. You have all of the information to actually hold them accountable. And that's why you care enough to actually spend that time asking them great questions. Because the great questions get them to think. The great questions aren't them there to hold themselves, like make them feel bad or guilty. It's just to make sure they're thinking about this and make a decision based on facts. I used to say this all the time. I used to speak in front of, there's been times I've spoken in front of 120,000 people in one day, as low as 2,500 people in one day. And it is funny when I was wearing a mic at the time, I'd say, hey, I don't argue.
Explanation.
I'm not gonna argue with you. I'm right. Because I'm gonna talk about facts and you're gonna argue basically on emotion. Emotion doesn't get us anywhere. Emotion's reactive. Facts are non-reactive. So as long as you can lay out the facts, people sit there and take it and go, I appreciate that. I have that more often than not. And the companies that I train their sales teams or train entrepreneurs and coaches, they're more appreciative of the coach or sales team going, I can really appreciate, I see what you're saying, and we have more people that come back to us, or to them, I should say. And I even do it with my own business. If the person's not at a level and not ready to come in, I'm by far ready to give them my email, say, hey, you have a question, reach out. I'll give them an hour and a half, tell them the steps they need to take to move forward in order to get that forward momentum so they can either work with me or at least have that level of success they deserve. We're here on this planet to help other people succeed. And as long as you put other people's needs first, I've always learned, and I know I'm a sales guy, that's funny to hear. I've been on a very long journey with my sales career, and the 1st of April was my father's second year anniversary, or passing. He passed 2 years ago. So my sister flew out to Florida to surprise me, which was, in a way devastating and in a way amazing. My dad he did startups before startups existed. He built 13 businesses starting in the 70s. And they're all in business today. And they all still use his model. And I found that out at his service 2 years ago. And I learned it by watching him. He was more than willing to go out of his way to help people and put other people's needs first. That he didn't need success to feel successful. He was successful by allowing that to actually happen. And I believe in the energy in a conversation happens the same way. So my sister and I had a great conversation this weekend, and I told her I was speaking today, and she had as many ideas as I did. It was funny to hear us on the same lines. But again, if you put other people's needs first, you're always going to be successful, whether your business is thriving or not. Okay. When you are doing a startup, we're going to go back to the desperation thing briefly. When you are doing a startup and you may be really wanting to get that first sale, you really have to ask yourself, along with what Fabio was mentioning earlier, making that decision, being decisive, committed, with the discipline. You're going to have to be disciplined in the sense of not compromising. Because in a sale, when you compromise, you really become out of alignment. You instantly out of alignment. And when that happens, that alignment really shifts to a negative side of the aisle. Let's say this, you're always on that line. You're always going to be in alignment or out of alignment. Unfortunately, there's no gray area there, you guys, in the sale, because the energy is going to be felt by the person you're speaking to. So the second you compromise, I've always said sales are a game, you've lost the game. And imagine you compromise and you have a product or a service that can, help everybody, but you allow one person into your program or workshop, or maybe you sell them a product that's not going to work for them, or maybe you smudge the line, right? It really calls into question, you start to question yourself and your integrity. And the thought process is a slippery slope from there. And so the truth has always served me well. So when I am selling, I don't have to fudge the truth. I don't have to compromise. I don't call into question my discipline, my integrity, my compassion for others. And I've named it literally ruthless compassion, because I'm going to go after somebody that I know I can help, or an entrepreneur can help. I'm going to go after them with full intensity, because they're a lot of times their own worst nightmare. And I think that's in full alignment with helping, right? So again, that slippery slope, we got to watch out that we don't compromise. And it can go both ways. So if I go after someone with this ruthless compassion, I'm in alignment. But if I know somebody that desperately needs my help, right? Desperately needs help. Let's take it to a max beyond max, right? So I was listening to sales calls for one of my clients, and this gentleman talks about how, I listen to sales calls all the time and break it down. It's a great way for me to help the people I'm training. And this gentleman said that he's kind of been talked off the ledge from committing suicide numerous times. And the salesperson never touched it. And I'll be honest with you guys, I almost broke down emotionally in that call, listening to it. Because it hit me right then and there that that person didn't need a sale, that person needed someone to show up for him. He needed someone to love on him, for compassion, empathy. He needed somebody just to listen to him for a brief moment and make sure he gets pushed in the right direction. Instead, that salesperson who's is doing phenomenal, working through it with them. Unfortunately, that gentleman didn't get that help. In a sense, that to me is compromising as well. Don't compromise. Make sure if you're going to go after someone truly needs the help, that you show up there and you push them hard. The compromise that could be made is, I don't want to touch that question. I'm not qualified. I'm not equipped. Whatever it may be, that process has to exist to have that open conversation. And the way that, this is a perfect segment, awesome. The way that perfect conversation happens is you never use a script. Never use a script, okay? There's always 3 segments to a conversation. The 3 segments are agreement discovery, future pace, set goals, and then the last bit being the close. The close, you talk a little bit about what you do or what you have. You discuss it with them. And even in the close part, you discuss it with them. You don't push them. You lead them. Because if you push somebody, you're going to push them away. If you lead somebody, they're going to follow you. Okay? So what we want to do in a sale is have that agreement. Hey, this is something to be asking you questions. If they agree to it, yes. Once I get that agreement, it is open season. I can ask them anything and go anywhere in the conversation I like, because I own the conversation. Okay? I only ask questions. I don't talk, I ask questions. And once I ask a question, they give me the information, I ask another question. And I avoid the ahas, I understands, okays, those sounds. We avoid those. We don't go there. It's distracting, breaks the train of thought, and breaks the real discussion. Okay? We stay away from that. Because if you're talking about something and the person's like, yep, they have to formulate an answer to the question. And once they give you the answer, ask another question, and that's how you lead somebody. You can drop little breadcrumbs about the program or product or service you have throughout by saying, oh, that's great, da 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 da. Again, commit to 10% less of time. Once you get the discovery section happen, move into a future pace or even like a goal setting. Okay. I deem my outlines, and they are outlines because there's nothing you have to hit. It's just a discussion. Once you hit certain areas, and I always describe it as walking people into the deep end of the pool until I'm able to hold their head underwater for a brief moment. It comes after this goal setting or future pace. I want to really find out what their struggle is. And there's several reasons we do that. And I'm going to give you the reasons because it's going to help everybody. The reason you do that is it reminds them why they're on the phone with you in the first place. And it's the last little bit just before you go into what you do, product or service, and how much the cost is. And there's a difference, and I use that word cost, because if they don't move forward, it's going to cost them something. And that something is usually they're going to remain where they're at. They're going to be stuck, or they're going to have that feeling of non-forward movement, stagnant. They're going to be emotionally lost, hurting. There's a million things. I mean, if people go, well, they're just calling about something. They're scheduling the appointment, or they're wanting your product or service for a specific reason. And you really have to take that into account. Because if it's not that big of a deal, they wouldn't schedule it. It's something, I mean, you talk about why Tony Robbins gets $65,000 a year, and it's because he can use the emotional side of it. You know, he can do that. He's got the thing. And working with him is more than $65,000 a year now, it's even more. But at that point, you kind of have to really be their best friend and question why they scheduled the appointment in the first place. Why are we on the phone? Why are we talking? Why are you standing in front of me? Whatever the reason may be. From COVID, it's a little harder to stand in front of somebody anymore, but regardless, they're there for a reason. So you really have to dissect that during the discovery section. Again, don't compromise, okay? Don't become desperate, and show up to help. Those are the biggest things you really need to do in every call. It's that simple.
Powerful stuff, that, Josh.
Thank you.
It's because you can feel that it's coming from us. It goes back to the value in the service, isn't it? In the amount that you're looking out for people, but also you've got a headache tablet for their headache with what you're offering. You know, that's always, you're looking for the pain points, but you know, they're coming to you for that headache tablet to solve their headache, but you're doing it out of a value service as well. So, you know, it's really important to understand that. And I like the way you make it so simple. It sounds so simple to when you hear it that way, you know, the 3 points. So it's, you know, very valuable, even for me now, you know, just hearing that, it reaffirms a lot of stuff for me about what we offer and what we do. It's key for that. There's a question here from Ruby. How long did it take you to figure out you have to talk 10% of the time for it to work out, to work?
Well, technically I've been in sales my entire life, so I don't know. Let's see. I would say probably 10 years ago. 10 years, and it took me a lot of tweaking and playing with. And again, back to the fun thing about sales, you guys, and everybody, is when you're doing a startup, your sales, the people you get on the phone with, is how you measure your marketing. It's how you tweak your marketing. It's how you find out about people. So when you're talking too much, you're not doing the market research. That's the way I've always looked at it, you know? Now a lot of I've even tweaked the entrepreneurs I work with. The sales team is now in marketing meetings. Because they need, or at least one of them is, that can get feedback from all the salespeople and go directly to the marketing team. You go, this is what we're struggling with. I will be as blatant to say that I listen to the calls and I type out, or write out the emotions that I'm feeling on the call, right? And then I'll literally write, okay, if they're this and this and this, it equals this, okay? If they want freedom, or they want to travel more and do this as their goal, that means they don't have freedom. That's what they don't have. So when I sat down with a marketing team recently, a pretty big marketing agency, a big name, I sat down with them and I said, hey guys, I've got a lot of experience doing this. It was the first time ever on the phone with them. I wanted to show the salesperson how to do it. And I gave them the information. And they didn't ask one question. They didn't even open it up to a discussion. The marketing agency did. I had a follow-up call with an entrepreneur later that week and I said, fire them immediately. Fire them. They don't need to be there. X amount of dollars a month. Why? They don't want to further your cause. And you have to look at sales that way. You're on the phone with them to further them, to get them, where they want to go. That's what marketing agencies do for entrepreneurs and coaches. They're there to further their cause. So.
I love the statement, Josh, that we're on this planet to help other people. I think that's really powerful, something that we all need to learn from. And I love the story about your dad as well. 13 businesses that are still going is incredible. And still working to his processes. That's fantastic.
Crate and Barrel was his biggest client. So Crate and Barrel is a huge, huge company. So I wouldn't say his client anymore. He sold that business. He was excited about building a business and seeing what he could do to help other people. And so we always the stuff he built, I was like, where do you come up with this? It's amazing to watch, and I use a lot of the stuff he taught me. So
that's cool.
Brilliant. Really good story.
There is another question here, Steve. Josh, is it possible to say what the 3 areas of the conversations are again from Rihanna?
The discovery section, which is really understanding and getting to know who the person is. And I don't just say, oh, how are you doing today? I go deep. I had one person tell me that, are you a psychiatrist? No, if you look at my back shelf, a lot of those are books that cover psychology and I don't read, I love self-help books, but I really like autobiography because it gives me an in-depth look at a person's real life and their struggles and their wins. And it's just, that's encouraging. So the discovery section, I want to know what makes them tick. What I call the future-paced question is really understanding what their goals are. Okay? 3 months to 6 months. If the coaching program's a year, I'm going to use a year. If it's a 3-month program, I'm going to use 3 months. If it's a 6-month program, I'm going to use 6 months. I curtail that to that. And then the last section is really laying out whether it's a program or whether it's a product, laying it out and then talking about the price. Because that person is going to be like, oh, the price is this. And then it's going to say, well, I don't have that much money. I'm like, okay, well then do you want to stay where you're at? There's a lot of ways to go with the conversation. So anymore, I've actually really laid out the subject of the product or service. And then I ask a question to keep the person involved after each one of those. And I usually hit 3 topics of areas where they're of criteria or what we cover in a program or workshop. So every outline I set up for the sales team, that's what we do.
Right.